I was arrested in December 1974, over a year after the coup. I was at my place where I was doing the internship. I was still at the university, finishing my degree. And I was called to the office of the director of the hospital, who called me. And when I got into his office, there were two men waiting for me there behind the doors. And they asked me to leave the hospital, walk, and try not to escape. They put me into a van, they blindfolded me and took me to one of the many torture centers at that time, Villa Grimaldi. I was certainly submitted to torture. Electricity was put many parts of my body. They also had particularly special methods that I would apply to women, including the use of a dog that had been trained to sexually abuse females, detainees.
I was a medical student in Chile. The day of the coup, we came to medical school and we heard that the Moneda Palace, the presidential palace in Chile, had been bombed and that the coup d'etat was in action. A military patrol came in the house where we were staying and at night, and they came shooting and they detained us, and in the process I was shot in the arm, and even though we were completely unarmed and 17 years old, and they took us to the National Stadium in Santiago, where they concentrated large numbers of people, about 10,000 or more people were concentrated there. So I spent there about a month and a half. I was, of course, tortured like many people, interrogated, and eventually I was sent to a prison, and where I stayed for about a year, a little bit less than a year.
The Allende government was really introducing reforms and measures that were not only for the benefit of the working class, but were directly attacking the interests of the very, very wealthy people and powerful companies in Chile. I personally, I wasn't a supporter of Allende when he was elected. I come from a Christian background. I was converted to the cause, to the Allende process, because of the things he was implementing and he was applying. There was no doubt that for the majority of the population, for the working class, for the poorest in Chile, he was introducing important reforms that were transforming the lives of people like certainly me and my family.
The violence that was unleashed against the left and against the vast majority of people was a one-sided violence, because people were building a process of change through democratic and peaceful means. And the only violence that was applied in Chile was done by the right wing and the military with the participation and support from the United States.
The majority of the people that committed those crimes are not being put on trial. The majority of the people who are still disappeared, we still don't know where they are.
There was an academic program of training of Chilean economists in the University of Chicago, where Milton Friedman was a professor. This was a special program funded by the Rockefeller Foundation to train young Chilean economists that were given grants to go to the University of Chicago. These were the people that designed the program of reforms that the Pinochet dictatorship put in place starting from 1975. This group were known as the Chicago Boys, that produced the most extremist neoliberal program in the world, because it was put at the point of a gun. There was no opposition to it. It was a massive privatization of state assets. These state assets were actually, it's very similar in a way to the Russian oligarchs. The oligarchs of Chile were created immediately after the coup because they were able to buy, even sometimes with loans from the state, to buy state assets in telephony, electricity, etc., etc.
What was implemented in Chile, you could say, is money made out of the blood and torture and suffering, not only of those who died, but of many people who are living in Chile today, who have to pay for the education, pay for the health, have no security at work, working for whatever they can get.
Growth, yes, it has taken place, and there has been accumulation of wealth in Chile. But that accumulation of wealth is extremely unequal. Health is privatized, education is largely privatized. The state spending in education, for example, is about 16% compared to 80-something% borne by the families. In other countries of the OECD, state spending in education is approximately 70% and 30% paid by the family. So that is the level of transformation that's taken place in Chile. I think that the doors have been opened for a gradual change. It might take many, many years, it might take several years, but there's no question that in Chile people said enough is enough.